Ah, the Skywalkers. The solution to and the cause of the galaxy's biggest problems. With just one surprise line at the end of the movie, the entire Star Wars saga was thrown for a loop as the sweeping space opera suddenly became a massive family drama. Now, a severe case of daddy issues would upend a galaxy far, far away not once, not twice, but 3 times. Just what were the Skywalkers chosen to do? If it was balance, they did a terrible job. Maybe they were chosen to upend the cart. No matter how you feel about how it ended, if you were to create a big scorecard for the Star Wars galaxy, members of the Skywalker family would have done more to destroy the Jedi, disrupt the Force, and oppress the galaxy than anyone else. Take a seat, Palpatine, you're minor league. Chronologically, the first chosen one to come along was young Anakin Skywalker. The story that his mother tells is that the gifted little pod racer and protocol droid maker just sort of happened. Like midichlorians, Anakin's divine birth is sort of glossed over these days, but at the time was one of the reasons that Qui-Gon thought that he had come across the chosen one, the one Jedi that would restore balance to the Force. It would also, presumably, prevent the young Skywalker from having issues with his father, but instead he would just burn through a series of father figures that he would have increasing levels of issues with, including trying to kill 2 of them. Since Qui-Gon fell at the hands of Darth Maul, young Anakin Skywalker was taken under the wing of a slightly less young Obi-Wan Kenobi, himself being trained by Yoda now. Now that Padawan and Master relationship ended with a lesson on the importance of the high ground and choosing a non-Bernie place to have beef with your former master. In the time between being identified as the Chosen One and the marshmallow that got too close to the flame, the Republic devolved into a civil war, and thanks to an army of clones created by a Sith Lord and put into action by his masters Kenobi and Yoda, the Jedi Order was almost entirely eliminated. Finding another problematic father figure in Emperor Palpatine, Darth Sidious, the newly minted Darth Vader got a wardrobe upgrade and oversaw a totalitarian empire complete with not 1 but 2 wandering planet-killing space lasers. It took 2 other Skywalkers to solve the galaxy's Skywalker problem, with Anakin's son handling the lightsaber swinging and finding the good still in him duties, and his daughter handling the organizing the rest of the galaxy into an effective rebellion side of things. Unfortunately, that's not the end of the story. Son Luke went off to revive the Jedi, and daughter Leia went to reform the Republic. The only problem? Another member of the Skywalker family, this time Luke's nephew and Leia's son, Ben Solo. After a bit of a misunderstanding, Ben got the impression that Luke was out to kill him, and at that point decided that the dark side was the way to go, destroying Luke's school and going 1 step further and smashing his mother's new republic in the process. This caused Luke to peace out and go to a planet with adorable little bird creatures, and also less adorable creatures that he could milk. Leaving his sister to clean up his rogue Jedi mess. Like a proper Skywalker, young Ben Solo had a complicated relationship with his dad and his mentor. It wasn't until a Palpatine came along to put this whole Skywalker issue to rest. But thanks to the magic of branding, the Palpatine scion would take up the name of Skywalker even though the Skywalkers had done more to upend the galaxy than anyone else. Now, given this track record, just what were the Skywalkers chosen to do? Was Qui-Gon just wrong? Did Kenobi, Yoda, and Qui-Gon just make a huge mistake and choose the wrong chosen one? Did they not read the first part of the prophecy, if you train this terrible person, you'll need a chosen one to sort out his whole family? Or maybe they were meant to knock over a table that no one knew needed knocking over. To understand that, we have to look at the state of the Force and the Jedi at the time Anakin was discovered on Tatooine. It was the height of the Republic, and the presumably apolitical Jedi serve as a stabilizing force for the large coalition of planets and societies. It's a seemingly idyllic setup, except that a trade federation is starting to organize a group of separatist elements to upset it. They can't please everyone, but while the Separatists and the Republic itself are all being manipulated by the return of the Sith after they were thought to have been defeated, a little bit of looking under the hood found more than a few issues with the otherwise idyllic Republic. The Jedi Council seemed to hold a monopoly on the Force and protect it with a rather strict set of rules. But perhaps the most strict is who gets to train as a Jedi and when. In the original series, Yoda has a bit of concern over the teenage Luke being too old to begin his training. But in the prequels, we learn Yoda wasn't splitting hairs. Anakin was only 9 years old, and that was too old to start Jedi training. Turns out, the Jedi Order starts him very, very young. Given how things turned out for the Skywalker father and son, you might think that's prudent. But even the nephew who presumably started out immediately broke bad the worst of them all. Now that kind of early training also means that the Jedi have early indoctrination into their order. When you're training people to have control over the energy that flows through every living being and binds the universe, you're gonna want to make sure that they're gonna use it responsibly. But any institution like that can become insular and dogmatic. Fear of succumbing to the dark side has led the Jedi Order to eschew emotion altogether, but not quite as strictly as the pointy-eared folks from the other franchise with Star in its name for sure. After all, wielding the Force requires that the user reach out with their feelings. A Jedi has feelings and emotions, it's just that from an extraordinarily young age, they're taught to control them so that they can use the Force without being seduced by the dark side. Now, there are two ways to look at the dark side. One of them is the opposite of the Jedi's use of the Force. In this regard, the dark side counterbalances the Force the Jedi's use. A dictator with good intentions is still a dictator, and good intentions don't always lead to good results. But if you're dogmatic in your discipline, you can't always see or recognize unintended consequences. Now this means that the young Skywalker's age is actually a problem in Jedi training. Anakin has known nothing but the slave life. He was sold at the age of 3 and then lost in a card game, living most of his life as a slave to the junk trader Watto. While he's still a hopeful little guy and is able to build a racing pod in secret, it's not been an easy life living under the power of the Hutts. It's one of the first things that Yoda notices about young Anakin. Without having a connection to that reality, even Yoda has a hard time seeing the fate of anyone whose life is filled with strife and fear, making him unable to see Anakin's future or Luke's. Luke, like his dad, grows up on Tatooine, the rough life of a moisture farmer whose idea of a slick Saturday night is picking up power converters at the Toshi station. The difference this time is that Luke has grown older. He has learned the fear and suffering of being a poor moisture farmer and the empathy to want to make things better for people like him. This allows him to see the good in rogues like Han Solo, and even explains that urge that his father used to convince his mom to let him pod race to help the Jedi visitors to Naboo. The failure lies in trying to rebuild the Jedi Order while not having grown up in its regimented system. When his nephew is introduced to the dark side, then Luke doesn't or hasn't the ability to isolate it from him, and Ben goes all in, becoming Kylo Ren. The Jedi's strict teachings have had an unbalanced hold on the Force that held the Sith away for 1,000 years. When the Sith return, the Jedi no longer have the tools to deal with that side of the Force because they had to cut themselves off from it completely, blinding them to the rise of the dark side. So what was Anakin chosen for? He was chosen to do exactly what he did. Kick over the table. Anakin's destruction of the Jedi Order was the first step towards bringing balance back to the Force. Anakin's children then kick over his table. But they're not going to be able to maintain that balance because the Skywalkers were never meant to be balanced in the first place. They were meant to be chaos. This is why Luke runs away to Act 2, and why he initially recoils from Rey's affinity to the dark side. Rey has had perhaps the roughest life of the bunch before she begins her training, but instead of being driven by that anger, it fuels her empathy, unlocking the Force not for a set of elite Jedi warriors trained from birth, but for everyone, for people like Finn, or the other slave boy at the end of The Last Jedi that does what we all did as little kids. Raised our broom handles like lightsabers. Now, it might be that this narrative is one of unfortunate conditions, as we've known that the last entry we got for the Skywalker Saga was not the one that was intended. Leia was meant to sit center stage in the final movie, but was prevented by the untimely death of Carrie Fisher. If Leia had been able to complete the cycle, it could have been a different story altogether. One that suggests we had been looking at the wrong Skywalker the entire time, and it was always Leia that was meant to restore balance, fueled by her lifelong struggle for justice and freedom for all people. With a nod from the Skywalkers, though, Rey takes on the moniker to be the balance that the Skywalkers were never meant to be. If we balance the Force out, do we get those cool Darth names? Sidious, Maul, Vader, Dooku? Okay, maybe not Dooku. He had to be the Sith that no one liked in Sith school, so he gets the name that sounded like Dookie. Still, the coolest lightsaber handle.